how do people find you for consultation, or if they want to learn more about Lyme disease or want to be assessed or evaluated or treated?
Well, again, the two websites that I gave you are wonderful ones for getting information about Lyme disease. The ilads.org, ilads.org, as well as LymeDiseaseAssociation.org. My practice is in Center City, Philadelphia. I see new patients. Right now, I'm scheduling new patients toward the middle to the end of September. So if they call the office and leave their information, then I call them back and decide whether, we both think it's a good fit for them. And then if they want to see me, then, we schedule an appointment to do that.
Great. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the field? Because this is a very difficult population to treat. And how come you took on that challenge?
When my son was 11 or 12 years old, I remember one night he came down and he had an engorged deer tick in his ear, and I removed it, and he didn't have any other symptoms at the time. And I looked at what the American Academy of Family Practice, I'm a family practitioner, said, and it said, watchful waiting. And unfortunately, that was one of the worst mistakes I ever made, because gradually over the next 2 years, he became very seriously ill. And there were many other factors involved in that illness. And I've learned to treat my patients in a really holistic way as a result of my own child's illness. So I was working, trying to figure out what was wrong with him. And I was at a myofascial massage therapist appointment one day, and I was complaining about how sick my son was, and I couldn't figure it out. And the therapist turned to me and he said, "Ann, he's got Lyme disease." I said, "Well, how can he have Lyme disease? I've done the ELISA twice. It's negative," which is one of the tests that you do. And he handed me this flyer of Dr. Joseph Burrascano was coming down to speak at the Unionville High School on the 8th of May, 2003. And so I went to this lecture he was giving to the community about Lyme disease, and I was so amazed. I mean, I learned more in that lecture to the community than I had learned in the last 10 years of practicing medicine. It was just unbelievable. And I took the little booklet that it handed out with all the symptoms, and I checked off what I thought he had. And then I picked my son up from school the next day, and I said, "Okay, you fill this out." And he ended up having a whole lot more symptoms than I had. So I said, "Oh my goodness, you've got Lyme disease." So that started, and I started to treat him. So the lecture I heard was in May, and I tried to contact him. And in July, I went up for a week to observe in his office to learn what he was doing and try to understand how to treat tick-borne diseases. And then I came home after that, and within a few weeks, on July 22nd, 2003, I opened my own Lyme practice. Then I went back to study with him in September for another week. And then about 14 months later, I went to study with Dr. Charles Ray Jones, who was a pediatrician in Connecticut, who was the only pediatrician in the country that was actually treating pediatric Lyme disease. So then I started lecturing. I was asked to lecture about pediatric Lyme disease, and then I started lecturing multiple times a year all over the place. And I think I've lectured about Lyme disease and chronic illness in North America, Canada, Europe, and to all kinds of audiences, a lot of doctors' meetings and whatnot. So that's how I figured this out, is because my own son was sick. Nobody could help me. They told me it was all in his head, and it certainly wasn't in his head. So in 2003, I learned about tick-borne disease. And then in 2004, we found out that we were living in a moldy house. So I learned about treating mold illness and the problems with mold illness. And then in 2005, one of my patients brought to my attention a company that sold spagyric homeopathics, which is a special type of homeopathic. And I started learning from the naturopaths and the chiropractors that were teaching for this company. And I learned about hypercoagulability in 2005. And then I learned a whole lot more about naturopathic medicine, about nutrition, and about all kinds of herbal medicines. I'd always had an interest in herbal medicines, and grew a lot of herbs in my garden. But it was just such a wonderful, eye-opening experience. And it's so satisfying when people get better and people's bodies improve and their lives improve. And, the kids are able to go back to school and they're able to start doing their sports again, and they, get good grades again. I mean, it's just been incredibly rewarding to treat these patients. It's difficult. A lot of them are really sick, and the most difficult patients are the one that won't make the changes to get better. The ones that are sort of like that negative energy black hole that try to suck you down with them. And those kind of people, if they don't make changes, they're not going to get better. But so that's in brief, my story. It really started because of my own child's illness.
Thank you so much for a touching story. And are there any other doctors in the country to treat children and adolescents for their Lyme disease?
There are a growing number of doctors who are comfortable with that. And that's been one wonderful thing to see over the last, 5 to 10 years, is there are more and more doctors who are coming to understand it, because most of us got into it because of a personal reason. Either their spouse was sick, their child was sick, their parent was sick, they were sick, and they came to have this understanding and awakening about the problems. And so as more and more people are sick, then, doctors who become sick or become a family member becomes sick, then they understand it more. I've been also trying to teach other doctors how to treat pregnancy, because I've always felt comfortable treating women who have Lyme disease, during pregnancy and helping with their infants after birth and as they grow. So we need more doctors to treat pregnant people.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carlson. I know you're not just a Lyme specialist, you're also expert in managing and treating other forms of chronic illnesses. So I hope to have you come back to the show and talk about all that and share your experience with our audience.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here with you this evening.